and efficaciously implementing this salutary piece of legislation, that is the POSCO Act 2012. We are honored by the gracious presence of Honorable Justice Dr. Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud, the Honorable Chief Justice of India. We also welcome the Honorable Minister for Women and Child Development, Srimati Smriti Zubin Irani, Honorable Mr. Justice S. Ravindra Bhatt, Judge, Supreme Court, Honorable Mrs. Justice B.V. Nagaratna, Judge, Supreme Court of India, and Miss Cynthia McCaffrey, UNICEF Country Representative to India. On occasions like these, welcoming dignitaries by giving them mementos is a tradition. Today's ceremony will make this tradition exceptional and heartwarming, as these handmade paintings and greeting cards have been made with love and affection by the child survivors themselves. May I request Ms. Spalzis Angmo, Member Secretary, Ladakh Legal Services Authority, to present a memento to Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud. May I request Mr. Ajay Agarwal, Secretary, JJC, and Additional Registrar, Supreme Court, to present a memento to Honorable Minister Srimati Smriti Zubin Irani. May I request Mr. T.L. Gwete, District and Sessions Judge, Mizoram, to present a memento to Honorable Mr. Justice S. Ravindra Bhatt. May I request Ms. J. Maitrihi, Additional District and Sessions Judge, Telangana, to present a memento to Honorable Mrs. Justice B.V. Nagaratna. May I request Mrs. Preet Kamal, Additional District and Sessions Judge, Ahmedabad, to present a memento to Ms. Cynthia McCaffrey. It is the stellar leadership and guidance of the Honorable Juvenile Justice Committee of the Supreme Court that has made it possible for all of us to be here together on this auspicious morning. It is my honor to invite the Honorable Chairperson of the committee, Honorable Mr. Justice S. Ravindra Bhatt, to address this august gathering.
Good morning. I extend a very warm welcome to Honorable Justice, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Chief Justice of India, Honorable Minister Smriti Zubin Irani for the Women and Child Development, Government of India, Honorable Justice B.V. Nagaratna, Judge, Supreme Court, Ms. Cynthia McCaffrey, Country Representative, UNICEF India, my distinguished colleagues at the bench, colleagues from various high courts, officials of various departments of the central and state governments, members from the judicial and police academies, judicial officers, representatives of UNICEF, Enfold, and other organizations, and all other participants joining us today for the National Annual. Which is at the core of POSCO Act's objective. The JJC is a platform bringing together various stakeholders, attempting towards a unified approach towards issues concerning protection of children in conflict with law and those needing care and protection. For ensuring effective implementation of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act and the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, which is POSCO, and to further children's rights, keeping interests of the child at the core requires multi-level collaboration across institutions and stakeholders, and nuanced engagement with both their positive and negative experiences to enlist good practices capable of replication and as cautionary lessons to learn from. It was considered fitting for this year's National Annual Consultation on Child Protection to focus on the POSCO Act, which has completed 10 years since its enactment in 2012. As a diverse set of stakeholders in the child rights system participating in this consultation, we carry the significant responsibility of strengthening this robust law and its implementation. Unfortunately, the POSCO Act is often understood rather unidimensionally, the focus being on effective prosecution and conviction of the perpetrator. The abhorrent nature of the crime, where the young children are victims, securing punishment corners much of our attention. For the very same reason, focus on restorative justice in the form of the child's rehabilitation and healing is equally important. Balancing these while focusing on a child-centric and rights-based approach, which are the pillars of our juvenile justice system, necessitate a review of how different stakeholders are adapting to the special rigors and facilitating the wide protection that this legislation affords children. I am happy to note that this national consultation has been preceded by each state's JJC's context-specific review and analysis of various facets of the implementation of the law at the regional level, of the state's own successes and its lapses. This annual consultation serves as a conclusion to this nationwide effort and offers a chance to share notes and learn from one another who are facing similar challenges across state borders. The information received from these states reflects the significant strides made in establishing infrastructure and ecosystems for child-friendly procedures in some states, while there is still much to be done when it comes to training of human resources, sensitization of the provisions that afford holistic support to child victims, including interim and final compensation, among other aspects. The structure, format, and themes of our technical sessions, therefore, are based on feedback received from these regional consultations on how best to use our time together in this two-day event. The challenge of realizing POSCO Act's objective involves bridging the gaps between protections offered by the law and its implementation by stakeholders of the juvenile justice system, which includes all of you, the police, probation officers, juvenile justice boards, child welfare committees, state governments, child care institutions, district magistrates, NGOs, advocates, and others who are really the foot soldiers that can translate the protection the juvenile justice system and the POSCO ecosystem has to offer. This event provides an opportunity to learn from each other collaboratively to enrich our understanding of the issues that have arisen at different points of time in different regions. In collaboration with UNICEF, the JJC at the Supreme Court commissioned an empirical study undertaken by the National Law University, Delhi, of decided cases. The study is an intensive one based on data collected for distinct periods spanning 10 years of POSCO in 8 different states. The preliminary report of the study would be released today by the Chief Justice of India. A POSCO's victim's condition could be described as one, and I have written this small piece of verse, of betrayed trust and innocence lost, of mind in strife and stolen life. I hope this consultation will yield substantial solutions to the challenges and concerns that confront us in our common endeavor to achieve effective and swift justice to the victims of POSCO and, importantly, to restore their confidence in themselves and society and help pull them out from the dark abyss of victimhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sir. May I now request that the film depicting the decade-long journey be played on the screen.
देवता कैसे कि कागो को भी मारी फैलब पुलिसे कलो তাৰপিছত লৈ আহিলা দেউতাক তাৰপিছত জেলত ৰাখলা
মোৰ এইটোৱে আছিল মানে যেটো মানে জঘন্য কাম কৰিছে এইটোতো একো মাপ নাই মানে মই এটা কথাই জৰ্জকো কৈছো মই ইয়াৰ মুখ জীৱনত চাব নোৱাৰি
Definitionally, we did not have any special law with respect to abuse of children because those range of activities was not captured in the Indian Penal Code. What was generally there was, say, a molestation, and that too a molestation of women. In that sense, this is an improvement because provisions of the Act are cast in such language that it is gender neutral. It does not talk of a girl or a boy. So I think this is a very modern improvement on what our lawmakers had conceived of 150 years ago.
The game changer is to taking care of the best interest of the child. The POSCO Act says the moment the child came in contact with the law, you have to start taking care of that child.
Unlike any other victim of crime under the normal IPC, provisions are there to give them the best of help necessary right from the beginning of reporting, how it is to be investigated, or the statement of the witness or the victim are to be recorded.
The basic thing that we must understand is that for creating a force that is child-friendly, there is a need for a mindset change. So the first thing that we are doing in our skilling is the question of introducing the concept of empathy to bring about this change.
পুলিশ স্যারজনে বিৰাট ভাল আছিল ভাল ব্যৱহাৰ পাইছো আৰু পুলিশৰ পৰা আমি বহুতখিনি পাইছো হিতে আমাৰ গাড়ী দি ঘৰত থৈ যোৱা আৰু লৈ যোৱা যোনটো টাইমত লাগে ৰাতি কেতিয়াবা 12টা বাজিছে তেতিয়া আমাৰ ঘৰত থৈ গৈছে মানে আমি বহুত হেল্প পাইছো একো আমি প্ৰবলেম পোৱা নাই
One of the salient features is that it mandates the creation of special courts. There's an emphasis on child-friendly procedures, which I think is one of the most important highlights of this enactment.
We didn't want the children to go to the adult court and depose there in an environment which is really not friendly. They should be the center of the whole gamut of the trial, right? It is their case, their violation. And now we have this unique system where the child doesn't really have to come inside the courtroom, right? There's 3 rooms connected through CCTV and the child sits and she will depose in the comfort of a room as against a courtroom. which is very official, very very intimidating.
विक्टिम को जो पहले जो उसके पास डर था, भय था एक्यूज से, वो सब दूर हुआ है। अब बच्चियां हमारे पास आ रही हैं जज साहब के पास मिलकर अपनी जो भी समस्याएं हैं फ्रीली कोर्ट के सामने रख रही है, जिससे सजा का जो संख्या है काफ़ी बढ़ोतरी हुई है।
কোৰ্টত যাওঁতে মোৰ বৰ ভয় লাগিছিলে, তাৰপিছত মানুহবোৰ সাহস দিছে, তেতিয়া কামটো কৰিব পাৰোঁ। মই দেউতা জেলত গাঁৱতে কামটো পাইছোঁ।
Tackling issues of gender-based violence, sexual violence is extremely complex. UNICEF works with the government, with the specialized agencies, with civil society organizations to make sure that there are specialized rehabilitation services. Mental health and psychosocial support, counseling services are extremely critical for the girls and boys that suffer sexual violence to overcome that trauma.
Yeah, actually I was scared and nobody was with me. I was alone. No? My stepfather started misbehaving with me. My mother also was not there with me. So I have told my class teacher. Then she called Childline 109. Then afterwards, the support persons and everyone at there, they came to my school. They inquired about me and they took me to Bharosa.
Because of the various procedures that need to be followed during the course of investigation and prosecution, there's a lot of re-victimization of the child. So in order to ensure that the re-victimization does not take place, this Bharosa Center was formed. Right from the time the child walks into the Bharosa Center, there is a psychological counseling given, legal advice given to the parents if required, medical examination is conducted, support is provided by these support officers who even go to their houses.
Children who are victims of child sexual abuse or their families are not in the physical or the psychological state to understand the complex language of the law and thereby navigate its very complex procedures. So support person becomes a very critical person, an intermediary that helps the child so that the child gets justice at the end of it.
At the end of my case, my stepfather had got a conviction for 20 years.
The main purpose of the penal law is to punish the offender first, but side by side, the law is also taking care of regarding the rehabilitation, reintegration of that victim.
POSCO কেছত বহুত প্ৰেগনেণ্ট ভিক্টিমছ পাইছোঁ আমি, চ' তেতিয়া আমি তাহাঁতক সৰু স্পেচিয়েল ৰিলিফ এটা দিওঁ, এমাউণ্ট অফ 2,000, 3,000 তাহাঁতৰ একাউণ্ট খুলি দিওঁ। চ' উই হেভ টু থিংক ইন দিজ লাইনছ ফৰ ৰিহেবিলিটেশ্যন অফ দ্য ভিক্টিমছ।
So these are issues we try to make people aware through our legal service authorities, through various districts. We are trying to impart this knowledge and also awareness of the various issues about POSCO.
We are actually going out to schools, colleges. Now we are partnering with a lot of other organizations that are ready to go out with us to bring about this change.
Perhaps the biggest gain has been there's an marked increase in reporting, marked increase in the number of trials, and correspondingly marked increase in infrastructure of every kind, physical infrastructure, manpower. Most importantly, there's increased sensitization amongst policymakers, especially judges and prosecutors, about what kind of procedures should be adopted. So protection is prevention here.
We all know what Nelson Mandela told. The soul of every society is best revealed in the way it treats its children. So we are all at a very important point in history. How we implement POSCO Act and how we provide relief to these child victims will bear our souls and the soul of the society.
This film is not only a poignant reminder of the ordeal what a survivor undergoes, but also portrays the fact that concerted efforts by all stakeholders has been instrumental in the effective implementation of the POSCO Act. Our next distinguished speaker is Ms. McCaffrey. She is the UNICEF country representative to India. She has championed the cause of children and women for decades now. She joined the UNICEF in 2001 and has been mobilizing support for UNICEF ever since. I request Ms. McCaffrey to render her introductory remarks.
Honorable Justice Chandrachud, Chief Justice of India, Madam Smriti Irani, Honorable Minister of Women and Child Development, Honorable Justice Ravindra Bhatt, Chairperson Juvenile Justice Committee, Supreme Court of India, Mrs. Nagaranta, Honorable Judge, Supreme Court of India, distinguished representatives of the judiciary and the Government of India, a very good morning. On behalf of UNICEF India, it is truly an honor to join you for this landmark event that demonstrates the highest regard with which India holds the protection and rights of every child. If I may begin with a simple but powerful quote, "The protection of children gives human life its best chance to prepare the way of liberty." These words are not from the Child Rights Convention. They were written thousands of years ago in the Bhagavat Puran, one of India's great scriptures. Thousands of years ago, before the international community of nations, before modern law, India gave us this bold ethic of universal child rights, and with it, a responsibility to stand in their defense at all times, especially in times of adversity. And India has stood ever since at the helm of the protection and rights of the most vulnerable children. Not just a common minimum standard of equity and dignity for all children, but an ever-expanding effort to nurture a society where children are not only safe, but thrive and grow to their fullest aspirations. It is truly an honor to be able to recognize here in person, in front of you and everyone, the leadership of the judiciary and the Honorable Minister of Women and Children and Child Development, Madam Irani. I also want to recognize, as Honorable Justice Bhatt did as well, those of you on the front lines, the vanguard for this effort, the first responders, the police, the judges and prosecutors, the social workers, counselors, child line functionaries, and other community service organization staff. You are on the front lines working daily with difficult cases and helping to save and change lives. Let me emphasize the following points. First, foundation. It's important that we have a foundation on which to build things that are meaningful and that will last. The Child Rights Convention is one of the greatest legacies of global cooperation. India was an early ratifier and has championed the Convention on the Rights of the Child globally. The convention enshrines the right of all children to live free from violence. Protecting children from harm is the first step. It is the bedrock. It is the foundation on which we build the entire superstructure of child rights. It's the foundation on which we build the superstructure of an inclusive, resilient, and growth-rich nation. My second point is obligation. This foundation brings obligations for all of us, and we can and must meet our obligations. Protecting children demands a unique, cross-disciplinary, and whole-of-society approach. Sexual violence is so pervasive globally because of harmful gender norms that are so deeply entrenched, because of existing social powers, dynamics that marginalize children, especially girls, and because of barriers to disclosure and justice faced by individuals, especially at the institutional and societal levels. What is this prevalence I talk about? It is estimated that 120 million women under the age of 20 years old have suffered forced sexual contact. Most often, as we've seen in the video, abuse occurs at the hands of someone a child knows and trusts. In addition, the internet has opened up a growing global market for risks, for materials, for opportunities. The third point I wanted to make is demonstration. On top of our obligations, demonstrating that we are committed to protecting children's rights, keeping them safe. India has demonstrated how much we can achieve through a strong legal and policy framework for protecting children from all forms of sexual offenses, both online and offline. It is commendable that India's approach extends the umbrella of protective services for the survivors to special courts, to legal aid, support persons, one-stop centers, and other rehabilitative services across the districts through the MWCD, Shakti, and Vatsalya missions. My fourth point is the importance of continued action. Justice Bhatt and I were talking about the importance of action and how much progress we've seen before we came on stage. And while we recognize the progress we've achieved, we must also build on it and take action together to bring more children and more survivors into the circle of care. The recent declaration on 19th December as the World Day for Prevention of Healing from Child Sexual Abuse, it had 3 calls for action, and I'd like to table them, not only for themes of this consultation, but to highlight how India's work in this area can serve as a model for countries around the world. 1 is the need for strong legislation, meeting global standards. And I'm happy to note, and as all of you know, India is one of the front runners in this aspect. 2, call for and build a strong child protection system with adequate resources. A foundation of this has already been laid under the mission Vatsalya and Shakti, and we are all committed to ensuring that these systems continue to strengthen. 3, and one that I'd really like to focus and emphasize for all of us, is a call to work with communities to address harmful social norms that perpetuate violence. If we can prevent harm, that is the truest form of justice. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to see the Honorable Minister in action as she convened around convergence and focused on the importance of engaging community. Strengthening this requires greater investments in community and sub-district structures that are closer to children at risk, closer to where they live and play. And by being there closer to communities, we enable the ability to have effective early detection. It requires investing in teaching children about personal safety, creating safe spaces for them to speak up about the violence they've experienced, and importantly, working with communities to once and for all break the stigma and the culture of silence around these issues. Closer to the community means being closer to adolescents as well. Education, including on comprehensive reproductive health education, can help bridge knowledge gaps for adolescents and enable them to make informed decisions. Great strides have already been made on this through the Government of India's School Health and Wellness Program as part of Ayushman Bharat. India and the work of the MWCD under the Honorable Minister has also shown us that the rights of women and children succeed best when they are become social movements. We saw this in the campaigns to educate and save the girl child. We saw this in the success India has had in cutting in half the rates of child marriage. I hope we can capture and bring these lessons to turn child protection into a large social action led by and with communities. My 5th point is around partnership. We are here because we're doing this together. UNICEF is proud to be a partner with the government and partners in communities. UNICEF is working with government and stakeholders across the country in 17 states to support the capacity of the workforce, rehabilitation and healing of survivors, technical support for child-friendly procedures and large-scale programs that engage with communities and adolescents to shift norms, create better awareness. With all these points, I'd like to conclude by reiterating UNICEF's commitment toward ensuring that every child is protected from exploitation and abuse, that victims are provided the support and protection they need and deserve. We will do this by continuing to expand on our 7-decade-long support and partnership with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, the justice system, all of you, with parents and teachers, with service providers, and above all else, with the children we all serve. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Today, we are fortunate to have on the dais an eminent personality whose foray into and rise in the political theater is well documented. She once remarked, "A leader takes you where he wants you to be, but a woman takes you where you ought to be." Her zero-tolerance stance for crimes against children was amply demonstrated when she introduced the POSCO Amendment Bill 2019 in the Parliament. Without much ado, may I now request the Honorable Union Cabinet Minister, Srimati Smriti Zubin Irani, to render her special remarks.
Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. Chandrachud, Honorable Chairperson, Juvenile Justice Committee, Supreme Court of India, Justice Ravindra Bhatt, Honorable Justice, Supreme Court of India, B.V. Nagaratna ji, in the audience, Honorable Justices of the Honorable Supreme Court of India, on the dais, Cynthia McCaffrey, the country representative of UNICEF, ladies and gentlemen. With the permission of Honorable Justice Bhatt, may I reiterate a few words that he said in verse. That when we look at the protection of children from sexual offenses, we need to remember that this is a story of betrayal, of broken trust, of a mind in strife, not only during the duration of a trial, but a mind in strife in eternity, and a life of innocence stolen, an impact that is rendered not only on the child, but those that the child loves, and a love that is impacted such that it is shattered beyond repair. I say this today because it was a decade ago that I stood as an opposition member in the upper house of Parliament, the Rajya Sabha, told to speak on a law that I was extremely passionate about. Because in the power corridors, I heard many men whisper that I've been a victim, but I can't speak. I had many women tell me that forget political partisanship, let's speak as one. And I still remember when I spoke, I was met with silence, because many in the house and outside knew of victims that could not speak, but hoped that justice was still delivered. So today is a day to pay homage to those who got justice and those who are still waiting for it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely grateful for this annual stakeholders meet to protect our children. And I say this because they are the only entity in this country who's not a vote bank. And they need our consideration and our kindness consistently. Today, I'm honored that the CGI will bring forth a report of trials and tribulations with regards to a decade of POSCO and its impact across 8 states. But I would like to here refer to a study undertaken supported by the World Bank, wherein there was a reflection of over 2 lakh cases across 28 states and union territories of India. What I'm about to pronounce is what I hope is reflected upon by the stakeholders. The average time that is taken to dispose of a POSCO case is 509 days. If you look at the national capital, in 2020, the highest average case length was 1284 days, which means that the number of days it remained pending before it was disposed of in the national capital. For every conviction, there are 3 acquittals, and 56% of all the cases correspond to offenses of penetrative sexual assault, and aggravated penetrative assault accounts for 25.59% of the cases. Which means that today we have a mechanism that still needs a robust intervention. In my conversation on the sidelines with Justice Bhatt, I said, yes, we are extremely focused on the mental health of the victim child. But can you imagine the judges and the prosecutors who bring forth the evidence, who engage with the victims? Have we ever reflected on the need to give them support that will also help strengthen the system? I was extremely grateful that Justice Chandrachud, when we discussed this particular issue, also spoke about how we can prevent re-traumatization of the child victim. We have known of many victims who have been raped, assaulted at a young age, as young as 6 years, and have had to wait, and every time they go to present an evidence, or every time they know of the case and its processes, it is revisiting the trauma that was thrust upon them. Just a slight example. I know of an 8-year-old child, I shall not name the child, raped in 2016. Conviction happened in that case in 2020. However, that child is yet to receive compensation in entirety. With the child's guardian approaching the National Council for Protection of Child Rights, that I do not know the magnitude of the compensation that the child is to be given, and I do not know who to go and get it from. So my request to the stakeholders would be, could you highlight methodologies where the Government of India, and especially the Ministry of Women and Child Development, can help such children, can help such guardians get a conclusion when it comes to issues not only related to justice, but particularly also compensation. We know today, thanks to this study undertaken with the support of World Bank, that 40% of days in hearings on POSCO cases are spent at the stage of evidence. With regards to our police administration, how can we better our systems at the stage of not only collection of evidence, but also at the stage of engaging with the victim child with regards to the same evidence? This I speak from a perspective of preventing re-traumatization of the child victim. Today is a day where many stakeholders will reflect on how we can strengthen our mechanisms at the grassroots level. Under the directions of the Honorable Prime Minister of India, with the support of the Nirbhaya Fund, the Government of India has actualized over 1,000 fast-track courts in the country, of which over 300 courts are particularly dedicated to the cause of children and the POSCO Act. My request today to the stakeholders and the Honorable Justices is, can you tell us infrastructurally what more can be done by the Ministry of Child Development so that we can ensure we partner with the justice system in our country to expedite solutions for our children? One of the prime agenda the Justice Bhatt has pronounced to me is the need for restoration. But that need cannot be fulfilled if justice is denied or delayed. I am hopeful that under the guidance of the Chief Justice of India, with the support of Justice Ravindra Bhatt, we can fill these gaps so that though those young ones have had a mind in strife, they may feel that their lives are stolen, but we can reinstitute a sense of trust, if not in those who have betrayed it, but at least in the system. With that, ladies and gentlemen, my grateful thanks for your presence in this annual stakeholders meeting. For your presence alone is a testimony that you are here to protect the future of India. Jai Hind.
Thank you, ma'am. As 2022 marks a decade since POSCO was enacted, this was a significant opportunity to assess its effectiveness. The Center for Child Rights and Juvenile Justice at the National Law University, Delhi, with the support of the Supreme Court Juvenile Justice Committee and UNICEF, undertook an intensive study of its implementation on various parameters across selected districts. Their preliminary findings have been compiled into a report which will be discussed later today. May I now request Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, to release the report. The best among us have gravitated towards inclusivity, not exclusivity. They have been the bridge builders, the door openers, and the wall breakers. Inclusivity and diversity have found voice in the verdicts of the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud. His every judgment unfailingly embodies the spirit of the Constitution of India. It is my honor and privilege to request Honorable Sir to kindly deliver his keynote address.
Very good morning. Smriti Irani, the Union Minister for Women and Child Development, my distinguished colleagues, Justice Ravindra Bhatt and Justice P.B. Nagaratna, my other colleagues who are in the audience this morning, Justice Anirudh Bose, Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, Justice Ram Subramaniam, and Justice Rishikesh Roy, Ms. Cynthia McCaffrey, the country representative of UNICEF India, the distinguished judges of the High Courts who are here with us this morning, judges of the POSCO courts, members of the Juvenile Justice Committees, panelists, experts, and everyone present here today. As I was in 2019 when I spoke at that stakeholders consultation, it's an honor this morning for me to be delivering the keynote address of the National Annual Stakeholders Consultation on Child Protection, particularly because the issues surrounding the rights of children are close to my heart. Everything that you're going to discuss over the next day and a half or 2 days is part of a week's work in the life of a judge. So as I was scanning through the topics for discussion, I said, wait a minute, this is exactly what I've dealt with yesterday, or this is something which I've dealt with just a week ago. So everything that you're going to discuss has so much of contemporary significance to the work which all of us do in different capacities as stakeholders in the system. At the outset, I must congratulate the Supreme Court Committee on Juvenile Justice, headed by Justice Bhatt, for conceptualizing and organizing this conference. The Supreme Court's Committee on Juvenile Justice has spearheaded multiple efforts aimed at protecting minors, including during the COVID-19 pandemic, when it monitored the action being taken to secure the safety of children who were orphaned due to the pandemic. This year's theme for the National Consultation is the implementation of the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act of 2012, POSCO, as it is commonly known. 2022 marks the 10th anniversary of POSCO, making this an opportune moment for us to take stock of its implementation. When I heard of the theme for the annual stakeholders consultation, I cannot but be reminded of the incomparable words of Nelson Mandela. On the occasion of the launch of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, he said, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." If we are to introspect, there is much in our souls that needs attention. There is much truth to this statement. World over, children are the voiceless victims of physical, emotional, and sexual violence, and India is no exception to this phenomenon. The enactment of the POSCO Act in 2012 was a watershed moment in the history of child rights in India, because it finally provided a specialized mechanism for the adjudication of sexual crimes concerning children, while prioritizing the best interests of the child. It is gender-neutral legislation which provides for in-camera trials, support persons for the child-friendly cross-examination practices, and the protection of the identity of the child. The enactment of the POSCO Act, however, is only a first step in a long journey. The families of child victims are immensely hesitant to file a complaint with the police. And so we must be very careful about entrusting excessive powers to the police. The slow pace of the criminal justice system is undoubtedly one of the reasons for this. But other factors play a significant role as well. Issues concerning the sexual abuse of children continue to be plagued by immense stigma. There exists a culture of silence which stems from shame and conceptions of family honor, which we too so often confront in our courts. Two harmful stereotypes contribute to entrenching this culture of silence. The first is the stereotype that only the girl child can or is likely to be sexually abused. The second stereotype is that the perpetrator is a stranger. Research has consistently demonstrated both that boys are at equal risk for sexual abuse and that the perpetrator is known to the victim in an overwhelming number of cases and may be an immediate family member, caretaker, or neighbor. The sexual abuse of children, therefore, remains a hidden problem. If the parents of the child do not wish to report the issue, the child is left without a voice and can exercise little agency. But then there are children who have no parental support because they are pretty much left on the streets where they have no protectors. In that sense, the guardian of the child quite literally guards the rights of the child. While the mandatory reporting requirement in the POSCO Act is aimed at addressing the issue of underreporting, it is essential to ensure that this does not prevent access to health care. Therefore, in my judgment for the Supreme Court, I recognize this principle in X versus the Principal Secretary Health and Family Welfare Department of the NCT of Delhi, where we ruled that registered medical practitioners need not immediately disclose the name of the minor to the authorities in case where the minor seeks an abortion but does not wish to be involved with the criminal justice process until access to health care is received. Exposure to sexual violence at an early age leads to severe trauma and impairs cognitive development. It has lifelong ramifications and limits the fullness with which the child could have lived his life. Beyond the direct and profound cost to the victims, it affects their communities, disrupts social cohesion, and increases the burden on health, social welfare, and criminal justice systems. The Delhi Commission for the Protection of Child Rights found that there is a high correlation between child rape and dropping out from school. The long-lasting implications of child sexual abuse make it imperative for the state and other stakeholders to create awareness regarding the prevention of child sexual abuse, its timely recognition, and the remedies available in law and otherwise. Children must also be taught the difference between safe touch and unsafe touch. While this was previously couched as the good touch and the bad touch, Child rights activists have urged parents and others to use the words safe and unsafe because the word good and bad have moral implications, especially for children, and may prevent them from reporting abuse. The use of professional counseling services must also be encouraged, especially because many parents are unaware that this can help the child deal with trauma. Above all, there is an urgent need to ensure that the so-called honor of the family is not prioritized over the best interests of the child. The state must encourage families to report cases of abuse even where the perpetrator is a family member. It is an unfortunate fact that the manner in which the criminal justice system functions sometimes compounds the victim's trauma. The executive must therefore join hands with the judiciary to prevent this from happening. The research project conducted by the Center for Child Rights and Juvenile Justice of the National Law University, Delhi, revealed that judges assigned to the POSCO courts reported insufficient infrastructure and the low availability of trained support personnel. Many FIRs which were evaluated in the research project invoked the incorrect provisions of the POSCO Act, which concerned less serious offenses than the one which was complained of. Finally, compensation of financial assistance was provided in a minority of cases. The revelations of this report suggest an urgent need for all branches of the state to ensure that the police and support personnel are properly trained, that adequate infrastructure is available, and that compensation is disbursed in a timely fashion. To this end, model guidelines for vulnerable witnesses deposition centers were circulated to all the high courts, as directed by the Supreme Court in Smriti Tukaram Badade versus State of Maharashtra. Vulnerable witness deposition centers are in the process of being set up across the country. The installation of these centers is in line with the United Nations Guidelines on Justice in Matters Involving Child Victims and Witnesses of Crime 2005, which recognizes that child-sensitive procedures such as these centers form a part of the child's right to be protected from hardship during the justicing process. As judges, we must also remember that children may not have the same vocabulary that adults do and may not be able to discuss the details of abuse in the same way that adults do. But this does not mean that they do not know what the perpetrator has done to them. Children of different ages may express themselves differently, but the essence of what they are communicating must be understood, especially during the examination in chief and cross-examination. Their contact with the criminal justice system must suit their needs as a vulnerable class of people. Years ago, when I was a judge of the Bombay High Court, we had a report in a daily newspaper which spoke of serious acts of sexual abuse of children who were lodged in children's homes, a private children's home. We appointed a very senior IAS officer to investigate, and she would come back and report to us periodically. And over a conference table, because we thought we shouldn't hold these hearings in the formal environment of a courtroom, she explained to us how she could draw out the children, play with the children, talk to them, paint with the children, take them out into the garden, speak to the children over a length of time before the children actually opened out and spoke about the nature of the sexual abuse that they had faced. And some of the photographs which she showed us during the course of these hearings were indeed absolutely shocking to us. But I do believe, therefore, that this collaborative partnership between different stakeholders in the process can really take us a long way in alleviating the problem which we perceive. Technology may also provide to be a useful tool in this endeavor. Video conferencing facilities from within the courtroom or otherwise can be used to put children at ease while testifying. Child-friendly courts have deployed other mechanisms, such as one-way mirrors, separate entrances for the child and her parents, and child-friendly waiting rooms. It is my hope that every court in the country can someday call itself a child-friendly court. The NCRB data for 2021 indicates that 53,873 cases were registered under the POSCO. 36% of all crimes against children are therefore covered within the rubric of this. 61.9% cases were cases of rape. The increase in the POSCO courts and in the number of public prosecutors must be matched by specialized training and attendant court infrastructure. Very often when we have special legislation, we increase the number of courts, we increase the number of judicial officers. But that in itself is not going to be adequate unless, particularly an area as sensitive as this, we attend to other infrastructural issues, including psychological support and counseling and expert care within the precincts of the courtroom. I've already spoken about the dangers of re-victimization. Re-victimization can take place and does take place at every step of our criminal justice administration. It takes place at the stage of investigation. That's why I spoke about the dangers of entrusting too great a power to the police to decide as to whether a crime has or has not been committed, or whether a cognizable offense should or should not be registered. Because re-victimization can take place at the stage of the investigation itself. Second, re-victimization takes place during the course of the trial itself, by the kind of procedures which we follow, by the kind of practices that we follow in the course of examination or cross-examination. Re-victimization takes place in terms of the ambient environment which we create in these trials. Re-victimization takes place in the course of rehabilitation. If our rehabilitative techniques are not sufficiently geared to be sensitive, re-victimization can take place even during the course of rehabilitation. And re-victimization takes place sheerly by the nature of the delay itself that is involved in the process. So we must, looking forward, think about innovative means and move away from conventional methods, of course consistent with the rule of law. The curricula of schools, of police and the judicial academies have to be evolved, and we must have a national model, particularly for the state judicial academies. Child psychology and techniques for communication must be focused upon when we train our own judges and public prosecutors. Finally, I note that one of the topics for the panel discussions today is to do with the judgments of POSCO courts in quote-unquote romantic cases or cases where consenting adolescents engage in sexual activity. As you are no doubt aware, the POSCO Act criminalizes all sexual activity for those under the age of 18, regardless of whether consent is factually present between the two minors in a particular case, because the presumption of the law is that there is no consent in the legal sense below the age of 18. In my time as a judge, I've observed that this category of cases poses difficult questions for judges across the spectrum. There's a growing concern surrounding this issue, which must be considered by the legislature in view of reliable research by experts in adolescent healthcare. I think I should leave this topic right there because it's something which is very vexed, as we see in the courts every day that we deal with these cases. On that note, I would really end my speech this morning. I'm certain that this national consultation will be a success and that all the participants will learn from one another. My grateful thanks to the Ministry of Women and Child Development and to UNICEF for providing their support to the event, and I assure you that the Supreme Court will extend every form of support, whether in terms of our jurisprudence or in terms of our administrative care for ensuring the success of our mission over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sir, for illuminating the path before us. Today, we are privileged to have amidst us Honorable Mrs. Justice B.V. Nagaratna. Honorable Ma'am has been the epitome of what can be termed as compassionate judging. Through a verdict of hers, she removed the stigma attached to certain children by ordaining that there may be illegitimate parents but no illegitimate children. I humbly request Honorable Ma'am to propose the vote of thanks.
Namaskar. A very good morning to everybody. Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud, Honorable Minister for Women and Child Development, Government of India, Srimati Smriti Zubin Irani, Honorable Justice S. Ravindra Bhatt, Judge, Supreme Court of India, and Chairperson, Juvenile Justice Committee of the Supreme Court, my distinguished colleagues of the Supreme Court, Ms. Cynthia McCaffrey, Country Representative, UNICEF, and the entire team of UNICEF, Honorable Judges of the High Courts who are the chairpersons and members of the Juvenile Justice Committees, secretaries and officers from various ministries, Government of India and state governments, learned presiding officers of POSCO courts, conveners of the Juvenile Justice Committees of the High Courts, Secretary General and Registrars of the Supreme Court, learned panelists, representatives of Child Welfare Committee from across the country, deans and faculty of various national or universities, police personnel and child safety officers, distinguished invitees, members from the media, ladies and gentlemen. I took a minute or two to say all these categories of persons in order to say that we have at least demonstrated by being present together in one auditorium, and hope this demonstration will fructify into many more resolutions for our children. At the outset, I must say that it is reassuring that we have with us the support and commitment of all the dignitaries gathered here today, both on the dais and off the dais, as we strive to fortify the implementation of the POSCO Act 2012. This significant piece of legislation has served a nation for a decade in our endeavor to increase conviction rates, reduce trauma, and help children and young adults to recover from sexual abuse. This is therefore an appropriate juncture for us to embark on a course of corrective self-reflection, possible course correction, and perhaps even to plant the seeds of change so that we are not faced with a situation that poses a challenge to the adage, "It shouldn't hurt to be a child." I will be remiss if I do not rekindle some thoughts on the contemporary criminal justice paradigm qua child sexual abuse. In the context of the child sexual abuse, it is necessary to administer child-friendly justice at the highest attainable level. Justice that is accessible, age-appropriate, speedy, adapted to and focused on the needs and rights of the child. It is necessary to administer justice that is respectful of the rights of the child, including the rights to due process, right to participate in and understand the proceeding, and right to privacy and dignity of the child. It is for this purpose that the POSCO Act has constituted special courts. I am informed that the current pendency of trials pending pertaining to offences under the POSCO Act stands at 2.26 lakhs or more throughout the country. The central government has suggested a remedy to this situation by increasing the number of fast-track courts, and I think there are about nearly 400 of them, to hear and dispose of matters relating to child sexual abuse. While this is certainly a welcome move, I must caution that setting up fast-track courts alone would be futile unless such measures are complemented with the appointments of more judges to try offences under the Act, and by training and sensitization of judges, public prosecutors, police personnel, as we just heard Honorable Chief Justice say about it regarding the prevention of re-traumatization and regarding the support for mental health as stated by the Honorable Minister in her speech. The role of experts when coupled with a child-centric legal process could in fact help a child victim trek through the emotionally arduous path of recovery following abuse. With these few words, I have the pleasant duty of offering my vote of thanks on behalf of the Juvenile Justice Committee of the Supreme Court of India. At the very outset, I exhort every functionary within the justice delivery system to imbibe the compassion and vision of Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice Chandrachud, in seeking to administer justice, particularly for children. His Lordship has spared time to inaugurate this national consultation despite his extremely busy schedule. I sincerely thank him for his presence today and for his address. I thank the Honorable Minister for Women and Child Development, Government of India, Srimati Smriti Zubin Irani, for her presence and words of reassurance and motivation. The earnestness of Honorable Sri Justice S. Ravitrapat towards the vision of child-friendly justice has to be applauded, and this national consultation on the implementation of the POSCO Act over the decade is his brainchild. I thank him for initiating this dialogue. I thank all my distinguished colleagues for their presence. The commitment demonstrated by UNICEF India under the leadership of Ms. Cynthia McCaffrey must inspire every child safety officer and NGO committed to the cause of securing justice for children. I thank you for always supporting the cause of juvenile justice in India along with your team. I would also like to convey my most sincere acknowledgement of the efforts of the High Court Juvenile Justice Committees and the POSCO committees and the honorable judges who are the chairperson and members of the said committees. I thank you for your presence and participation in this two-day consultation. The secretaries of the Ministries of Women and Child Welfare, officers and officials of the central government, as well as state governments who are present here today must be thanked for their support to the Juvenile Justice Committees in their implementation of the POSCO Act. Representatives of the Child Welfare Committees from across the country, members of the judicial and police services who have traveled from across the country to be present here for the 7th round of the national consultation are to be thanked. It is only when such spirit imbues the functioning of every court, government office, non-governmental organization which is engaged in securing justice for children that we as a nation and as a society can protect the tender age of children and their innocence. I express my gratitude to everybody. Today, India is one of the youngest countries in the world with around 31% of its total population comprising of persons under the age of 18 years. I meant a young country in that sense. The journey towards achieving the lofty ambition of protecting everyone of such children from various manifestations of abuse will be an arduous one. I thank all institutions and individuals committed to this endeavor. I thank the distinguished experts, panelists, activists in the field who care so much for child victims of sexual abuse and every participant of this consultation for engaging in deliberations as we seek to recalibrate and formulate a roadmap detailing the manner in which resources and efforts will be concentrated over the next decade of operation of the POSCO Act. I thank each one of you for your presence. Today, on the occasion of Human Rights Day, let us take a pledge to consider how human rights may be actualized for every child, particularly those in contact and in conflict with the law. Let us jointly reaffirm our commitment to protecting our children from various manifestations of abuse. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you, Honorable Ma'am. May I now request the esteemed dignitaries on the dais to kindly join us for a group photograph. Thank you. This is the end of this inaugural session. All the distinguished invitees can proceed to the foyer for tea and refreshments. The dignitaries from row A to F may kindly go towards the exit on their right, and the rest of the dignitaries can go on my right, to the exit on my right.